Welcome back to my channel. Before we deep dive into our summary, I have one small favor to ask. If my channel has benefited you in any ways, please like, subscribe to my channel, and press the bell icon to get notification whenever new summary is uploaded. Before we get into the heart of Dabble Doodle Try, we have to talk about the brilliant mind who wrote it. If you're going to trust someone telling you to stop focusing, you want to make sure they know exactly how the human brain works. Meet Dr. Srini Pillai. Dr. Pillai isn't your average self-help author. He is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and a brain imaging researcher. For 17 years, he served as the director of the Outpatient Anxiety Disorders Program at the world-renowned McLean Hospital. He has spent his entire career looking deep inside the human skull using fMRI scans to see which parts of our brain light up when we are stressed, when we are productive, and most importantly, when we are creative. But what makes Dr. Pillai unique is that he isn't just a lab coat scientist. He is also the CEO of the Neuro Business Group, where he acts as a brain coach to some of the top executives and leaders in the world. He takes complex neuroscience and turns it into high-performance strategies for the boardroom. The reason this book is so special is that Dr. Pillai is a polymath himself. He's a musician and a poet, which means he understands the art of creativity just as much as the science of it. He wrote Dabble Doodle Try because he saw a focus epidemic, a world where people are burning out because they don't understand their brain's natural rhythm. Today we are going to learn his secrets to unlocking the unfocused mind. So let's dive into the work of Dr. Srini Pillai. Chapter 1 of Dabble Doodle Try. This is written specifically for your audiobook channel, designed to be read aloud with a conversational and insightful tone. The audiobook deep dive. Chapter 1. Introduction and welcome. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are starting a journey into a book that might just be the most important thing you read or listen to this year. We are deep diving into Dabble Doodle Try, Unlock the Power of the Unfocused Mind by Dr. Srini Pillai. If you have ever felt like you're hitting a mental wall, or if you feel guilty for staring out the window when you should be working, stay tuned. We are about to learn why that wandering is actually your brain's secret weapon. Before we dive into Chapter 1, if this channel has helped you find new ways to grow and learn, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me keep this library of insights growing for you. Chapter 1, The Beat of Your Brain. In this first chapter, Dr. Srini Pillai introduces us to a revolutionary way of looking at the human brain. We live in a world that is obsessed with focus. From the time we are children in school, we are told to pay attention, focus on the task, and stop daydreaming. But Pillai argues that this focus cult is actually harming our productivity and our mental health. The core of Chapter 1 is about the cognitive rhythm. Pillai explains that the brain is not a machine that can run at 100% focus all day long. Instead, it operates like a heartbeat or a breath. It needs to contract, focus, and expand, unfocus. The science, CEN versus DMN Pillai, breaks down the brain into two primary networks. 1. The Central Executive Network, CEN. This is your focus circuit. It's what you use when you are doing tasks, writing a report, or following a recipe. It is logical, linear, and takes a massive amount of energy. 2. The Default Mode Network, DMN. This is the unfocused circuit. For decades, scientists thought the brain was off when we weren't focusing. But Pillai reveals that the DMN is actually an energy hog. When you unfocus, your brain isn't resting. It's working on a deeper, more complex level. The flashlight versus the floodlight. He uses a brilliant metaphor here. Focus is like a flashlight. It is very bright and helps you see the path directly in front of you. However, it creates tunnel vision. You can see the rock in the path, but you can't see the beautiful meadow to your left or the shortcut to your right. Unfocus is like a floodlight. It's softer, but it illuminates the entire landscape. When you activate the DMN, your brain starts connecting distant ideas. It links a memory from 10 years ago with a problem you're facing today. This is the birthplace of innovation. Inattentional blindness. One of the most startling parts of Chapter 1 is Pillai's discussion on inattentional blindness. When we focus too hard, we actually become blind to the obvious. He mentions the famous gorilla study, where people watching a basketball game completely miss a person in a gorilla suit walking across the court because they were too busy counting passes. When we overfocus at work, we become that person counting passes. We miss the gorilla, the big opportunity, the creative solution, or the warning sign because our flashlight beam is too narrow. The cost of fatigue. Finally, Chapter 1 warns us about ego depletion. Focus is a finite resource. If you use it all up in the first 2 hours of the day by forcing yourself to concentrate without a break, you will be cognitively bankrupt by noon. This leads to bad decisions, irritability, and burnout. The beat of the brain isn't just a suggestion, it's a biological necessity. We must learn to unfocus to allow the brain to replenish its glucose and energy levels so that when we do need to focus, the flashlight is actually bright enough to work. What I have learned, disclaimer, please note that this What I Have Learned section is based solely on my personal interpretation of the text and may differ from the author's original intent or clinical nuances. After sitting with Chapter 1, the biggest lesson I've learned is that mental rest is not laziness. I used to feel a deep sense of shame when I couldn't stay focused on a script for 4 hours straight. I thought I was losing my edge. Now, I understand that my brain was simply trying to switch to the floodlight mode. I've learned that if I want to be more creative, I have to give my default mode network permission to run. I've started practicing mini unfocus sessions. Instead of scrolling on my phone during a break, which is still a form of focus, I just sit and look at the trees or the wall. I'm letting my brain breathe. I also realize that my best ideas for this channel never come when I'm staring at a blank document. They come when I'm in the shower or driving. That's the DMN at work. Chapter 1 taught me to respect the rhythm of my own mind. That wraps up our deep dive into Chapter 1. It's a complete shift in how we think about our heads, isn't it? We are moving from the focus cult to the rhythm of the brain. Introduction to Chapter 2. Welcome back. If Chapter 1 was about understanding the biology of the unfocused mind, Chapter 2 is where we start getting into the action. Dr. Srini Pillai calls this chapter Conjuring Creativity, and it centers on a concept that most of us have been taught to avoid: dabbling. In our modern economy, we are told to niche down and become hyper-specialists. But Pillai argues that the secret to being a visionary isn't doing one thing perfectly, it's doing many things imperfectly. Before we break down the power of the dabbler, a quick reminder: if you're finding value in these summaries, please like and subscribe to help the channel. Chapter 2. Conjuring Creativity. In Chapter 2, Dr. Pillai tackles the myth of the expert. He explains that while mastery is important for execution, it is often the enemy of innovation. When you become an expert in one narrow field, your brain develops deep neural ruts. You think in a specific way because that way has always worked. To break out of those ruts, you need to dabble. The power of the polymath, Pillai points to some of the greatest minds in history: Einstein, Galileo, Steve Jobs. None of these people stayed in their lane. Einstein played the violin when he was stuck on a physics problem. Steve Jobs took calligraphy classes that seemingly had nothing to do with computers. Why does this work? Pillai explains that when we dabble in a hobby or a new skill, we are engaging in conceptual collision. Our brain takes the structure of music and tries to apply it to math. It takes the beauty of calligraphy and applies it to software design. This collision is the spark of genius. Dabbling versus mastery. A key takeaway from this chapter is that dabbling is not about becoming a professional in a new field. In fact, it's better if you're bad at what you're dabbling in. When you are a beginner, your brain is in a state of high plasticity. You are making more mistakes, which forces the brain to stay awake and flexible. If you only do things you are good at, your brain goes on autopilot. Autopilot is the opposite of creativity. By picking up a paintbrush, a garden trowel, or a new language, you are shaking the snow globe for your mind. The side effect of hobbyism. Pillai cites research showing that Nobel Prize-winning scientists are significantly more likely to have a high-level hobby in the arts than their less successful peers. The arts provide a safe space for the brain to practice uncertainty. In your day job, uncertainty feels like stress. But in a hobby, uncertainty feels like play. This chapter teaches us that by playing in the unimportant areas of our lives, We build the mental muscle to handle the important problems at work. Transitional thinking. The chapter also explores how dabbling facilitates transitional thinking. This is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at once. When you dabble, you are constantly comparing your main work to your hobby. This comparison allows your brain to find metaphors. And as Pillay notes, metaphor is the language of the default mode network, DMN. If you can describe a business problem as if it were a gardening problem, you unlock a different part of your brain to solve it. What I have learned, disclaimer. Please note that this What I Have Learned section is based solely on my personal interpretation of the text and may differ from the author's original intent or clinical nuances. Chapter 2 really challenged my productivity guilt. I used to think that if I spent an hour playing a video game or trying to learn how to cook a complex meal, I was wasting time that could be spent on this channel. Now I realize that dabbling is an investment. I've learned that my brain needs these side projects to stay sharp. I recently started dabbling in basic woodworking. I'm terrible at it, my birdhouses are crooked, but I noticed something amazing. While I'm focusing on the wood, my brain is secretly working on the structure of my next video. I've learned to stop trying to be efficient every second of the day. Being a dabbler has made me more curious and less afraid of making mistakes in my main work. It has taught me that the most useless hobbies are often the most useful for my mental health. That is the power of the dabbler. It turns out that having too many hobbies isn't a sign of a lack of focus. It's a sign of a creative engine that is firing on all cylinders. Are you a secret dabbler? What is that one hobby you have been neglecting because you thought it was a waste of time? Let me know in the comments. In the next segment, we're moving on to Chapter 3, where we look at dynamic learning. We'll talk about tinkering and a wild concept called psychological Halloweenism. You don't want to miss it. Chapter 3, Dynamic Learning in a Brave New World. We are going to look at why the way we were taught to learn in school is actually holding us back in the real world. We're going to talk about tinkering and a strategy that sounds like a party game, but is actually a high-level neurological tool, psychological Halloweenism. If this channel has been a part of your learning journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the community grow. Chapter 3, Dynamic Learning in a Brave New World. Ender Pillay begins this chapter by critiquing our modern educational system. From a young age, we are taught linear learning. This is the idea that you start at point A, focus intensely, and move to point B. It's rote, it's rigid, and it relies entirely on the focus circuit, the CEN, we discussed in Chapter 1. The problem? The world isn't linear anymore. To succeed in a brave new world of AI, rapid innovation, and constant change, we need dynamic learning. This requires the ability to tinker. What is tinkering? Tinkering is the process of playing with information without a set goal. In the focused mind, if you don't have a goal, you feel lost. In the tinkering mind, being lost is part of the discovery. Pillay explains that when we tinker, we are essentially prodding our brain to see how it reacts. Think of a child with a box of Legos. They don't always start with the instruction manual. They just start clicking blocks together to see what happens. This play allows the brain to form non-obvious connections. In a professional setting, tinkering means taking a problem and looking at it from bizarre angles, shifting the data around and asking, what if, without the fear of being wrong. The concept of enclothed cognition. A fascinating section of this chapter deals with how our physical environment and even our clothes affect how we learn. Pillay cites studies on enclothed cognition, which shows that people perform better on attention-related tasks when they wear a white lab coat they believe belongs to a doctor. Our brains are highly suggestible. If we feel like learners, we learn better. This leads into the most famous technique in the book, psychological Halloweenism. Psychological Halloweenism, becoming someone else. If you are stuck on a problem, it's often because you are the person who created the problem. Your biases, your fears, and your specific way of thinking are the walls of your mental prison. Psychological Halloweenism is the act of trying on another person's identity to solve a problem. Pillay suggests that you literally imagine you are someone else, a mentor, a historical figure like Leonardo da Vinci, or even a fictional character like Sherlock Holmes. When you do this, you aren't just pretending. Neuroscientifically, you are shifting your brain's perspective. You are giving yourself permission to think thoughts that the old you wouldn't allow. If you imagine you are a bold, risk-taking CEO, your brain actually lowers the activity in the amygdala, the fear center, allowing you to see solutions that were previously hidden by your anxiety. Learning through metaphor and body movement. Pillay also emphasizes that dynamic learning isn't just a mental game. It's a physical one. He discusses embodied cognition, the idea that the brain learns through the body. If you're trying to understand a complex flowchart, try walking in a pattern that mimics that flow. If you're trying to learn a new language, use gestures. By involving the body, you are tinkering with the physical space around you, which sends stronger signals to the brain's default mode network. This makes the information stick in a way that staring at a textbook never could. The slow-motion multitasking of geniuses. Finally, Chapter 3 discusses how high-level learners often have several projects going at once. This isn't the frenetic multitasking that ruins focus. It's a slow-motion rotation. When you get bored or stuck on Project A, you tinker with Project B. This cross-pollination ensures that the brain never gets bored and always stays in a state of dynamic learning. What I have learned, the biggest takeaway for me from Chapter 3, is that the expert mindset is a trap. I realize that the reason I sometimes struggle with new video topics is that I'm trying to be too professional from the start. I'm trying to follow the linear path of how a summary should look. I've started using psychological Halloweenism in my creative process. When I'm editing and I feel stuck, I ask myself, if I were a world-class documentary filmmaker, how would I transition this scene? It sounds silly, but it works instantly. It's like it opens a different drawer in my brain that contains ideas I didn't know I had. I've also learned to value tinkering time. I used to think that playing around with new software or reading articles unrelated to my niche was a waste of time. Now I see it as fertilizing the soil of my mind. Learning isn't about filling a bucket, it's about lighting a fire. And tinkering is the spark that starts that fire. Most importantly, I've learned that I don't need to have all the answers before I start. I just need to start clicking the blocks together and trust that my brain will find the pattern. Chapter 3 really changes the game, doesn't it? It's about turning the world into your laboratory. Learning isn't something that happens in a classroom. It's something that happens when you're curious enough to tinker with the world around you. How can you use psychological Halloweenism today? Who are you going to be to solve your biggest problem? I'd love to hear your costumes in the comments. Chapter 4. Mastering Multitasking. Dr. Srini Pillay introduces a massive plot twist. He argues that while heavy multitasking is indeed a disaster, there is a specific type of light multitasking that can actually make you smarter. It's time to talk about the power of the doodle. If you are ready to stop feeling guilty for scribbling in the margins, hit that like button and let's get into it. Chapter 4. Mastering Multitasking. Pillay begins Chapter 4 by addressing the multitasking paradox. On one hand, we are told that the human brain can only do one thing at a time. On the other hand, we live in a world that demands we juggle a million inputs. The danger, Pillay explains, isn't necessarily the number of things we are doing, but the cognitive load those things carry. When we try to do two high-focus tasks at once, like writing an email while listening to a technical lecture, our brain's central executive network, the focus circuit, crashes. However, when we pair a high-focus task with a low-energy physical task, something magical happens. The science of doodling. The centerpiece of this chapter is a study by psychologist Jackie Andrade. She found that people who doodled while listening to a boring, monotonous phone message were able to recall 29% more information than those who didn't doodle. This sounds counterintuitive. Shouldn't the act of drawing distract you? Pillay explains that doodling acts as a safety net. When you are in a long meeting or a boring lecture, your brain eventually gets tired of focusing. Without a doodle, your mind will bolt. It will drift off into a deep daydream about your vacation or a worry about your mortgage. Once you've drifted that far, you lose 100% of what is being said in the room. Doodling provides just enough leakage for your excess mental energy. It keeps the brain idling without letting it drive away from the building. It occupies the part of the brain that wants to wander, allowing the listening part of your brain to stay tethered to the speaker. continuous partial attention versus supertasking. Pillay makes a vital distinction here. Most of us suffer from continuous partial attention, which is that frantic feeling of checking your phone every 2 minutes. This is bad multitasking because it keeps the brain in a state of high-stress alarm. However, there are people he calls supertaskers. These are individuals who can integrate multiple streams of information without their performance dropping. The secret to becoming a supertasker isn't working faster. It's using the default mode network, DMN, to handle the background noise. By using unfocused tools like doodling or rhythmic movement, you train your brain to filter out distractions rather than fighting them with brute force. The nudge technique. Another key concept in Chapter 4 is the nudge. Pillay suggests that we should use multitasking as a way to nudge our brains back into focus. If you find yourself staring at a screen for 20 minutes without typing a word, your focus circuit is exhausted. Instead of trying harder, you should engage in a micro-multitask. Get up and walk while thinking about the problem. Or, as the chapter suggests, start doodling your problem. Don't write words, draw the feeling of the problem. This shifts the processing from the logical left brain to the creative right brain, nudging the solution to the surface. Visual thinking and memory Pillay argues that we are a word-heavy society, but our brains are image-hungry. When we doodle, we are translating abstract concepts into visual shapes. This creates a dual coding effect in the brain. You aren't just hearing the information, you are seeing it through your hands' movement. This is why doodlers have better long-term retention. They have encoded the information in 2 different neural pathways. What I have learned, Chapter 4, was a huge aha moment for me. I've spent years apologizing for fidgeting or sketching during meetings. I thought it meant I had a short attention span. Now I realize that my fidgeting was actually my brain's way of staying in the game. I've learned that the goal isn't perfect focus, it's managed attention. I started keeping a doodle pad next to me whenever I'm researching for this channel. Instead of trying to stay perfectly still and disciplined, I let my hand move. I've noticed that I don't get that afternoon slump nearly as hard because my brain isn't exhausted from fighting its own natural urge to wander. I've also learned that multitasking isn't the enemy. Context switchings. I've stopped checking my emails, high focus, while I'm editing, high focus. But I have started listening to instrumental music or doodling ideas, low focus, while I'm brainstorming. The biggest lesson? Trust the scribbles. Some of my best video structures have come from a random shape I drew while I was supposedly distracted. I've learned to view my pen as a lightning rod that catches the creative sparks my focused mind is too busy to see. Closing for the video. So the next time someone tells you to put the pen down and pay attention, you can tell them that science is on your side. Doodling is your brain's way of staying awake in a world that's trying to put it to sleep. I want to hear from you. Are you a doodler? Do you find that you remember things better when your hands are moving? Drop a comment below and then let's start a doodle revolution. In the next segment, we're heading into Chapter 5, Getting Unstuck. We're going to talk about positive, constructive daydreaming and how to turn your fantasies into a professional strategy. You don't want to miss this one. We have navigated the brain's rhythm, learned to dabble, mastered the art of tinkering, and even validated our doodling habits. But even with all those tools, there comes a moment every professional and creator knows. The dead end. You're staring at a problem, and no matter how much you focus, no matter how many logic boxes you check, the answer won't come. In Chapter 5, Getting Unstuck, Dr. Srini Pillay dives into the mechanics of why we get trapped in mental ruts and introduces a structured, scientific way to use daydreaming to find the exit. This isn't just spacing out. This is positive, constructive daydreaming. Chapter 5, Getting Unstuck. Dr. Pillay starts by explaining that stuckness is a biological state. When we face a difficult problem and fail to solve it, our brain's stress response, the amygdala, begins to flare. This triggers a narrowing effect. Our focus becomes even tighter. And as we learned in Chapter 1, a tight focus is like a narrow flashlight. We keep shining that light on the same empty spot, hoping an answer will magically appear. To get unstuck, Pillay argues we must move from a stuckness frame to a possibility frame. Positive constructive daydreaming, PCD. The primary tool for this shift is PCD. Pillay distinguishes this from two other types of daydreaming. 1. Guilty dysphoric daydreaming, where you obsess over failures or what-ifs. 2. Poor attentional control, where you simply can't stay on task. PCD is different. It is a deliberate choice to let your mind wander into a playful, wishful, or imaginative space. Research shows that when you engage in PCD, you are activating the default mode network, the DMN, in a way that allows it to scan your entire mental hard drive for solutions. How to practice PCD. Pillay provides a specific prescription for PCD. It's not about sitting in a dark room. It's about doing something low effort and rhythmic. Activities like walking, folding laundry, gardening, or even a low-intensity video game are perfect. The key is the content of the daydream. You should imagine a scenario that is positive and expansive. If you are stuck on a business deal, don't dream about the deal itself. Dream about a successful future version of yourself, or imagine a playful solution that seems impossible in the real world. This play lowers the stress in the brain, which in turn allows the prefrontal cortex to reconnect with the creative centers of the brain. The circuit breaker effect. Pillay explains that PCD acts as a circuit breaker for the focus fatigue loop. When we are stuck, our focus circuit, the CENE, is essentially overheating. By switching to PCD, we are shifting the electrical load of the brain to a different circuit. This allows the CEN to cool down and replenish its energy, glucose, and oxygen. Often the aha moment happens exactly at the moment you stop trying. This is because the DMN has finally had enough space to deliver the solution that it has been working on in the background while you were busy being stuck. Overcoming probability thinking. A major hurdle to getting unstuck is what Pillay calls probability thinking. This is the part of our brain that says, that won't work, or that's not how it's done. This is the logical mind trying to protect us from failure, but it also protects us from innovation. Chapter 5 encourages possibility thinking. By using unfocused techniques, we bypass the inner critic or the probability filter. This is why many people have their best ideas in the shower. The physical sensation of the water and the lack of a goal creates a safe harbor where low probability but high brilliance ideas can finally reach the surface. What I have learned. Chapter 5 has completely changed how I handle frustration. I used to think that the moment I felt stuck was the moment I needed to buckle down and work twice as hard. I'd stay at my desk for hours, getting more and more annoyed, which of course only made the stuckness worse. I've learned that frustration is a biological signal to stop focusing. Now, when I feel that wall rising, I immediately get up. I use the PCD technique. I go for an aimless walk or I do the dishes. I don't listen to a podcast or try to learn something new. I just let my mind play. I've learned to trust the back burner of my mind. It's a strange feeling of letting go to get more done, but it works. I've noticed that when I return to my desk after 15 minutes of PCD, the problem that looked impossible even has a very simple solution that I just couldn't see before because my flashlight was too narrow. I've also learned that my fantasies and daydreams aren't a waste of time. They are actually a sophisticated form of mental simulation. They help me test drive different versions of my life and my work in a low-risk environment. I'm no longer afraid to drift. I see it as a vital part of my problem-solving toolkit. The next time you hit a wall, remember, don't just stand there and bang your head against it. Step back, let your mind wander, and give your DMN the space to build you a ladder. Getting unstuck isn't an act of will, it's an act of unwill. What's your stuckness cure? Do you find your best ideas in the shower, or maybe while driving? Share your stories in the comments. In our final segment, we'll be looking at Chapter 6, From Disenchantment to Greatness, where we learn how to put all these pieces together into a sustainable, long-term lifestyle. Chapter serves as the grand synthesis of the book, moving away from individual hacks and toward a complete lifestyle redesign. The Audiobook Deep Dive, Chapter 6. Introduction to Chapter 6. Welcome to the final chapter of our journey through Dr. Srini Pillay's groundbreaking book. We have learned the why and the how of unfocus, the biology of the brain, the power of dabbling, the necessity of tinkering, the focus-saving grace of doodling, and the problem-solving magic of daydreaming. Now in Chapter 6, From Disenchantment to Greatness, Dr. Pillay brings it all together. This chapter is for anyone who feels disenchanted with their work or their life. It's for the person who feels like they are on a hamster wheel of productivity but isn't actually getting anywhere meaningful. This is about moving from being a worker to being a master by mastering your cognitive rhythm. Chapter 6, From Disenchantment to Greatness. Dr. Pillay opens this chapter by discussing the concept of ego depletion. He explains that our focus circuit, the CEN, runs on a very specific fuel, glucose and mental energy. When we spend our entire day in a state of high-intensity focus, we aren't just tired, we become disenchanted. We lose our connection to our purpose, our creativity dries up, and we become prone to making impulsive, poor decisions. To reach greatness, we must move beyond the focus cult and adopt what he calls the Tinker Manifesto, the Tinker Table. One of the most practical tools introduced in this final chapter is the Tinker Table. Pillay argues that we schedule our meetings, our gym sessions, and our meals, but we never schedule our unfocus. A Tinker Table is a calendar that accounts for the cognitive rhythm. Instead of an 8-hour block of work, the Tinker Table breaks the day into oscillations. 90 minutes of high focus, your deep work sessions. 15 minutes of plan and unfocus. This is where you apply one of the 4 unfocused tools: tinker, dabble, doodle, or try. The goal is to prevent the brain from ever reaching the point of total exhaustion. If you wait until you are fried to take a break, it's too late. You've already entered the disenchantment zone. By scheduling unfocus before you need it, you keep your brain's fuel levels steady throughout the day. Circadian and ultradian rhythms. Pillay goes deeper into biology here, explaining that our brains have natural peaks and valleys. Greatness comes from knowing your own rhythm. Some people have a morning focus peak, while others find their DMN, unfocused circuit, is most active in the late afternoon. Chapter 6 encourages us to audit our own energy. When do you feel most tinkery? When do you feel most focused? By aligning your most difficult tasks with your focus peaks and your brainstorming or dabbling with your focus valleys, you stop fighting your biology and start using it as a tailwind. The fear of unfocus. A significant portion of this chapter addresses the psychological barrier to greatness, fear. We are afraid that if we stop focusing, we will lose our edge. We are afraid that if we dabble or doodle, our peers will think we are lazy. Pillay dismantles this fear by showing that the most successful people in the world, the greats, are those who have the courage to step away. He explains that greatness requires mental flexibility. If you are always focused, you are rigid. If you are rigid, you break when the world changes. Unfocus is the flex in your mental muscles. It allows you to pivot, to innovate, and to stay calm in the face of chaos. Integration, the whole brain mindset. The final message of the book is about integration. We shouldn't strive to be unfocused people. We should strive to be whole-brained people. This means knowing when to use the flashlight and when to use the floodlight. Greatness is found in the transition. It's the ability to move fluidly between the central executive network and the default mode network. It's the ability to work hard on a project and then have the wisdom to go for a walk and let the back burner finish the job. What I have learned. The final chapter of this book has been a total paradigm shift for me. I've learned that greatness isn't a destination. It's a rhythm. I used to view my work as a battle. I was fighting through my to-do list. Now I see it as a dance between focus and unfocus. I've started building my own tinker table. I used to feel like a failure if I didn't spend 8 hours straight at my computer. Now I realize that my 20-minute doodle and daydream sessions in the middle of the afternoon are actually the most productive parts of my day. They are the moments when the disenchantment clears, and I remember why I started this channel in the first place. I've learned that my fear of being lazy was actually holding me back from being great. By forcing myself to focus when my brain was screaming for a break, I was producing average work. Now that I give myself permission to unfocus, The quality of my ideas has skyrocketed. I've also learned to respect my ultradian rhythms. I've stopped trying to force deep work at 4 p.m. when my brain naturally wants to wander. Instead, I use that time for dabbling. I research weird topics. I watch videos outside my niche, or I just sit and think. The biggest lesson? Mastery is about balance. I've learned to trust my brain's default mode. I no longer feel the need to control every single thought. I've learned that if I take care of the rhythm, the greatness will take care of itself. I am more enchanted with my work today than I have been in years, all because I stopped trying to focus so hard. The Tinker Manifesto, your call to action. We have reached the end of our journey through the chapters, but this is actually where your real work begins. Dabble concludes the book with what he calls the Tinker Manifesto. It is a call to reclaim your mental freedom. The manifesto reminds us that we are not biological machines designed for 24/7 output. We are complex, rhythmic beings. To live by the Tinker Manifesto is to commit to 3 things. 1. Honor the interval. Give yourself permission to stop. Not because you are finished, but because your brain needs to breathe. 2. Protect the play. Treat your dabbling and tinkering as sacred. They are not distractions. They are the seeds of your future greatness. 3. Trust the unseen. Understand that just because you aren't thinking about a problem doesn't mean your brain isn't working on it, what I have learned. The manifesto taught me that the most radical thing I can do in a hyper-focused world is to sit still and do nothing. I've learned that my value isn't measured by how many hours I spend locked in, but by the quality and creativity of the ideas I bring to the table. I've learned to stop apologizing for my wandering mind and start celebrating it. I am no longer a focus slave. I am a tinkerer. About the author, Dr. Srini Pillai. To truly appreciate this book, you have to understand the man who wrote it. Dr. Srini Pillai isn't just a productivity guru. He is a powerhouse of science and art. The scientist. He is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and a former director of the Outpatient Anxiety Disorders Program at McLean Hospital. He spent 17 years studying brain imaging, which is why this book is so heavily grounded in neuroscience rather than just self-help fluff. The practitioner. He is the CEO of Neurobusiness Group, where he applies brain science to help top-tier executives and leaders improve their performance. He doesn't just study the brain in a lab. He sees how it breaks and thrives in the high-pressure world of business. The artist. Perhaps most importantly, Dr. Pillai practices what he preaches. He is a musician and a poet. He understands the dabbler mindset because he lives it. This unique blend of hard science and creative art is what makes Dabble Doodle Try so authentic. He didn't write this book to make us better cogs in the machine. He wrote it to help us become more fully human by using the brain exactly the way nature intended. Final wrap-up for your video. And there you have it, a complete deep dive into the world of unfocus. This book has the power to change not just how you work, but how you feel about yourself when you aren't working. Thank you for joining me on this 8-part journey. It's been an incredible experience to break these concepts down with you. If you've made it this far, you are clearly dedicated to your own growth, and I appreciate you spending your time here on the channel. What was the biggest moment for you? Was it the science of the DMN, the power of the doodle, or the Halloweenism trick? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Until next time, stop focusing so hard and start tinkering.